Have you ever felt like the more peaceful you become, the more alone you are? Like the clarity you've gained through struggle has built a wall between you and everyone else. There's a paradox happening that nobody talks about. The same journey that brings you inner peace often leaves you feeling profoundly misunderstood. And today, I want to show you why this isn't a sign that something's wrong. It's evidence that something is finally right. If you've ever felt too deep for shallow conversations, too awake for sleepwalking people, hit that like button and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, what's the hardest part about being misunderstood? Your words might be exactly what someone else needed to hear today. Let me tell you about something Viktor Frankl noticed that changed how I see everything. After surviving the concentration camps, after finding meaning in the worst hell humanity could create, Frankl returned to normal society, expecting to be understood. Instead, he found something painful. People couldn't relate to him. They wanted him to get over it, move on, be normal again. But Frankl had touched something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. He'd stared into the abyss and found purpose there. He'd discovered that meaning exists even in suffering. And once you see that, once you really see it, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to small talk and pretend it matters. Frankl realized that transformation creates isolation. Not because you become better than others, but because you're operating from a different frequency. You're asking different questions. You're valuing different things. And most people, comfortable in their familiar suffering, don't want to be reminded that another way exists. Here's what Andrew Huberman's neuroscience reveals about why this happens, and it's going to make you feel less alone. Your brain literally rewires through significant experiences, especially challenging ones. When you go through deep struggle and emerge transformed, your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for meaning-making and perspective, strengthens its connections. You develop what neuroscientists call cognitive flexibility, the ability to hold multiple perspectives simultaneously, to see nuance where others see black and white. But here's the isolating part. Most people's brains haven't undergone that rewiring. They're still operating from reactive patterns, from survival mode, from the same neural pathways they've had since childhood. When you try to share your hard-won wisdom, when you speak from that transformed place, their brains literally cannot process it the same way yours does. It's not that they're choosing not to understand you. Their neural architecture hasn't been rebuilt by the experiences that rebuilt yours. You're speaking a language their brain hasn't learned yet. Napoleon Hill spent decades studying extraordinary people, and he found a pattern that explains this perfectly. Every single person who achieved something significant, who thought differently, who saw possibilities others couldn't see, went through what Hill called the price of greatness, which was loneliness. Not the loneliness of having no people around, but the loneliness of having no one who truly understands what you see. Hill himself experienced this when he talked about visualizing success, about thoughts becoming things, about the power of definiteness of purpose. People called him crazy, unrealistic, a dreamer. But Hill understood something crucial. The misunderstanding isn't rejection of you, it's protection of their worldview. When you embody peace in a world addicted to chaos, when you choose stillness in a culture that glorifies busy, when you find meaning in simplicity while everyone's chasing complexity, you're not just different, you're threatening, because your existence proves that their excuses are optional. Pause for a second and like this video if you've ever dumbed yourself down just to fit in, just to not make others uncomfortable with your growth. And comment, what part of you are you hiding to keep the peace? Let's stop shrinking together. Neville Goddard taught something about this that will shift everything. He said that consciousness is the only reality, and people can only perceive you through the lens of their own consciousness. If someone's consciousness is rooted in fear, competition, and scarcity, they cannot see your peace. They'll interpret it as weakness, naivety, or pretension. If someone's consciousness is trapped in victimhood, they cannot celebrate your empowerment. They'll see it as abandonment or judgment of them. Goddard would tell you, the misunderstanding isn't about you at all. It's about where they are in their journey. And trying to make them understand before they're ready is like trying to explain color to someone who's never seen. It's not that you're failing to communicate clearly. It's that they don't yet have the internal experience to decode what you're saying. Your job isn't to make yourself understood. Your job is to remain true to what you've become. Let me tell you about Rachel. She spent her 20s chasing everything the world told her would make her happy. The career, the relationship, the image, the approval. And she achieved it all. And she was miserable. At 32, she had what people call a breakdown, but what she now calls a breakthrough. She left the corporate job, ended the relationship that looked perfect but felt empty, moved to a small town and spent a year in silence, in therapy, in deep inner work. When she emerged, she was peaceful. Truly peaceful. Not the fake Instagram peace with perfect lighting, the real kind that comes from accepting yourself completely. But when she reconnected with old friends, they didn't know what to do with her. They wanted the old Rachel, the one who complained about the same things they complained about, who participated in the drama, who validated their choices by making the same ones. The new Rachel, the peaceful Rachel, made them uncomfortable. They stopped calling, and Rachel felt more alone than she'd ever felt, even though she was more herself than she'd ever been. She told me something I'll never forget. I finally found myself and lost everyone else, but I'd rather be alone in truth than surrounded by people in pretense. Huberman's research on the social brain explains why Rachel's friends reacted that way. Humans are wired for social cohesion through a network of brain regions, including the temporoparietal junction and the medial prefrontal cortex. These areas are constantly scanning. Am I like my group? Is my group like me? When someone in your group changes significantly, especially in ways that highlight your own stagnation, these brain regions perceive it as a threat to group cohesion. It triggers discomfort, sometimes even hostility. It's not conscious malice, it's neurological self-protection. Your growth can feel like abandonment to them, even though you haven't gone anywhere. You've just stopped participating in the shared illusions, and that to the unchanged brain feels like betrayal. Frankl would tell you that this loneliness is actually a sign of psychological and spiritual maturity. He believed that true individuation, becoming who you actually are rather than who society expects, requires the courage to stand alone. He wrote that an abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is normal behavior. In a world that's normalized chaos, anxiety, superficiality, and disconnection, being peaceful is actually the abnormal response. And abnormal responses make people uncomfortable. Frankl found meaning in suffering, but he also found meaning in the loneliness of being understood only by a few, because those few, the ones who had also done the inner work, who had also been transformed by their struggles, understood him completely. And one person who truly sees you is worth 1,000 who only see your mask. Hill would make this practical. He'd tell you to carefully curate your inner circle, to protect your peace the way you'd protect your most valuable possession, because it is. He talked about mastermind groups, not just for business success but for life success. You need people around you who operate at your frequency, who understand your values, who've done their own work. Hill would say, stop trying to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Stop defending your choices to people who don't have the capacity to comprehend them. Instead, invest your energy in finding your tribe, the small group of people who don't need explanations because they're on the same journey. Goddard takes this into the realm of imagination and assumption. He would say, assume that the right people understand you perfectly. Assume that your tribe is finding you. Stop assuming you're destined for loneliness just because you're different. What you assume becomes your reality. If you assume nobody gets me, I'm too different, I'll always be alone, you'll unconsciously create that. But if you assume the people who resonate with my frequency are being drawn to me, I am understood by those meant to understand me. Reality will reorganize. Goddard didn't teach you to fake it. He taught you to live from the end result. Act as if the understanding you seek already exists, and watch how differently you show up in the world. I want you to do something right now. Think of one person in your life who truly sees you. Just one. Someone who gets it without explanation. Drop their name or initials in the comments. Let's remind each other that we're not as alone as we sometimes feel. Here's what I've learned about being misunderstood. It's not a bug, it's a feature. The same depth that makes you peaceful makes you incomprehensible to those who live on the surface. The same wisdom that gives you clarity makes you seem strange to those who prefer comfortable confusion. The same boundaries that protect your energy make you seem distant to those who are used to your porousness. You're not broken. You're evolved. And evolution always creates distance between stages. A caterpillar cannot understand a butterfly, not because the butterfly is arrogant, but because the caterpillar hasn't yet undergone metamorphosis. Your peace, your clarity, your depth, these aren't things you need to apologize for or explain endlessly. These are things you need to protect and honor. Frankl taught that suffering ceases to be suffering the moment it finds meaning. I'd add, misunderstanding ceases to be painful the moment you stop needing external validation. When your peace comes from internal alignment rather than external agreement, being misunderstood becomes neutral, not pleasant, but not devastating. You're no longer performing for an audience that can't see the play. You're living for an audience of one, yourself, your values, your truth. And the paradox is this: the moment you stop trying to be understood, you become magnetic to those who do understand. Desperation repels, groundedness attracts. Hill would remind you that every great invention, every revolutionary idea, every paradigm shift was misunderstood before it was celebrated. The Wright brothers were called foolish. Einstein was dismissed. Every pioneer is misunderstood by the masses because the masses are by definition behind the curve. If everyone understood you immediately, it would mean you're not growing beyond the collective consciousness. You're just reflecting it back. Being misunderstood is often evidence that you're ahead, not behind. It's confirmation that you've outgrown the old operating system. Goddard would tell you to go inward. In your imagination, in your inner world, you are completely understood. By yourself, by God, by consciousness itself. That understanding is more real than the misunderstanding happening in the external world. Because the external world is just a reflection, a shadow, a projection of consciousness. The inner world is the source. When you know yourself completely, when you understand your own journey, your own transformation, your own peace, that knowing becomes unshakable. Other people's confusion about you becomes background noise, not a crisis of identity. Here's the truth that will set you free. The most peaceful souls feel misunderstood because they've stopped performing the exhausting theater of normalcy. They've stopped pretending that shallow things are deep and deep things are weird. They've stopped laughing at jokes that aren't funny and caring about things that don't matter. They've tuned into a frequency that most people can't hear yet. And that's not tragic, that's transformation. You haven't lost connection with people. You've lost connection with pretense. And everyone who was only connected to your mask feels the loss. But anyone who can connect with your truth is on the way. If this resonated in your soul, if you felt this exact loneliness like this video, share it with someone who needs to know they're not crazy for being different, and subscribe because we're building a community of people who refuse to shrink back into old patterns just to be comfortable. Tell me in the comments, what's one truth about you that people constantly misunderstand? Let's normalize depth. Let's normalize transformation. Let's normalize outgrowing the life we used to fit into. I'll see you in the next one.